So enough talking for me. Guys, take it away.
He is also a commercial vehicle inspector, certified trooper, one of the few that we have on the road. So if you have any questions related to anything, either one of us should be able to help answer. Gonna start. Can everybody hear me, or do I need to talk louder? You good? Okay.
You can't speak too loud for this group.
We'll start with kind of what to expect at a roadside inspection. Has everybody in here been through an inspection before? No? All right. This will kind of clarify what we're looking for, what we're doing. So when we do stop you, there's absolutely no reason to be nervous. So there's two different definitions of a commercial motor vehicle. Minnesota, its own definition, has a GVWR of 26,001 pounds or more. A bus or transport hazmat regarding placards. However, we adopted the federal statute, so for anybody that crosses state lines, which would be all of you, it would be 10,001 pounds or more is a bus or transport hazmat requiring placards. Where this differs is whether we require a Minnesota annual inspection decal. If it's an intrastate vehicle under the 26,000 pounds, there's different rules regarding annual inspections versus when you cross state lines, then you hit the 10,001 pound mark. Two different ways we come up with this weight. Does everybody drive CDL required vehicles? Yes, okay. We either take the GVWR from the vehicle, truck and trailer would be combined, or the actual weight when we weigh you. There's there's a couple different ways that we weigh stuff here. We have scales, fixed scale sites that you come onto with the platform scales where we can get a weight of the vehicle, weights of the axles. We also have portable scales, so if we stop you roadside and are concerned with your weight, we can weigh you right there with portables. And we also do saturations for weight where we set up what we call a weigh-in motion. And then there's also fixed weigh-in motions on some of Minnesota's roadways. So a trooper can log into the computer system and see what you're coming over that weigh-in motion at. And if it's heavy, they can stop you and then they'll weigh you with portable scales. Weight is the one thing that is not federally regulated. So weights are going to differ state by state. So if you go through Minnesota and get stopped, doesn't mean you're going to go through Wisconsin and get stopped for the same thing. That's all up to the state how they want to enforce the weight. So this is what Minnesota adopted for the federal statutes. So qualifications, the driving, parts and accessories, hours of service, and inspection and repair. We have three types of inspections that we complete. We have a level 1 inspection, which is a complete inspection including going underneath and looking at the brakes. Then we have a level 2 inspection, which is going to be basically a walk-around inspection. We're looking at all the lights, the load, everything except for going underneath the vehicle. And then there's a level 3 driver only. Making sure your driver's license is valid and current, making sure you have all paperwork in your possession that you're required to have. So at any time it could be any one of these inspections when you're stopped, just depending on what we see, or if you're overweight and we need to look at your load, things like that will determine what type of level we do. A couple of big reasons that you get stopped. More so roadside than at the scale, because most people do put their belts on when they come through the scale. Wearing your seatbelt's a huge one. It's a safety device. Put it on, keep it on at all times while you're operating the vehicle. Drivers and passengers, if you have a co-driver or a passenger, they are required to wear them. Talking on your cell phone, it's been a no hand rule for a commercial motor vehicle world for a very long time. So just make sure if you're using a Bluetooth that it's charged, because the excuse that the Bluetooth died does not give you the right to hold that cell phone up to your ear. With cell phones comes headphones. A lot of drivers now have iPhones with the iPhone headphones. You can only have one headphone, one earbud in your ear at any time. So if you can't hear without having both in, you need to switch to a different device. That's a common one that we've seen lately, is drivers wearing both headphones. It's a safety thing. You need to be able to hear what's going on around you. If there's sirens coming from any direction or traffic making noise, you need to be able to hear that. If you've got both earbuds in, it diminishes your capacity to hear. We're always going to tell you what's going to take place. We use wheel chocks for safety. When we do our inspections, we're always going to tell you to release your brakes. Yes, we do this for every inspection. Yes, it is normal. It is how we hear for air leaks or ruptured brake chambers, air hoses, everything like that. When we inspect, a safety thing for us is we're going to tell you to turn the vehicle off. Just at no time that somebody is walking around your truck or underneath it should you ever turn the vehicle on. So for the inspection, these are things that you guys are going to be looking at basically for your pre-trip inspection as well when you're checking your equipment before you leave. Headlamps, turn lamps, ID lamps, clearance lamps. In the fronts, we're going to be checking windshield wipers, washer fluid. You have to have washer fluid in that reservoir. Now that we're coming up to winter, make sure you're checking your defrosters, making sure that those are working properly. We start down the driver's side, that way that you can keep an eye on us in the mirror at all times when we're inspecting. For your tires, we're looking at tread condition, wheel condition, to include any bulges, abrasions, cuts, cord showing, tread depth, lug nut tightness and condition. Make sure you don't have any elongated lug nuts or large cracks in your rims. If you're seeing those things, you need to stop and report them right away. Fuel tank, make sure it's secured, and make sure after you guys fill up with fuel, you replace that fuel cap. It is very common that we see you guys going down the road and you just forgot to put that cap back on, and then you're leaking fuel all over the road. So this is going to be the same for a straight truck or a full semi. Carrier name and DOT number has to be marked, displayed, visible at least 50 feet, and in contrasting color from the vehicle. Just make sure your decals are still on the vehicle. I know things happen to the trucks, so make sure you're checking that. Again, we're going to be looking for your annual inspection information. Does UPS plate any of their trucks out of Minnesota?
Yes.
Yes? Okay. So the Minnesota plated ones are required to have a Minnesota annual inspection, and they are required to have that inspection decal in the front left corner of the windshield. If it's not plated in Minnesota, it's required to have the federal inspection completed. Now that would either be the decal on the truck if it's legible, or the paperwork. I always recommend making sure you have the paperwork in the truck as well, because those decals wipe off pretty easily. I think the federal ones, most of the time, they just use Sharpie. So for the trailer, we're going to be inspecting the tires again. Suspension components, we'll take a peek under there and look at that. Make sure you don't have any cracked leaf springs that we can see, U-bolts out of place. Make sure your axle positioning is correct. We're going to be looking at the frame as well. And then load securement. A lot of times you'll be asked to open up the rear of your trailer. If your trailer is sealed, we do provide a new seal. So you don't ever have to worry about that. We'll seal it back up with a State Patrol seal. We'll note it on the inspection paperwork, and we can sign your load paperwork if we need to. We'll kind of go a little bit more into load securement a little farther on. If we're going to go underneath the vehicle, these are some of the things we're going to look at. A lot of these things you may not be able to see during your pre-trip inspection, but you should be aware if you're in the cab of the truck and you're not maintaining air pressure, we have an air leak somewhere, and you should be noticing that type of thing to look for. It could be coming from your brake lines, connections, brake chambers themselves, airbags. So the rear of the trailer is going to be about the same thing for lighting, looking for the rear end protection and the conspicuity tape. And then the right side's gonna be the same, just checking for all that stuff back up the right side. Once we get done walking around, we'll go underneath, or have you open up the hood, excuse me. Steering components and your suspension. So we're looking to make sure the front tires aren't making contact with any of the steering components. Your pitman arm is tight, none of those components are loose. Your steering wheel, we're looking at steering wheel lash. You shouldn't have to turn your steering wheel a ton of times to get the wheels to turn. It means we have a connection issue with your steering system. Again, suspension, looking to make sure that the front axle is in place, so there's no damaged suspension components. Looking for leaks. When we look for leaks, we're looking for an active leak. I know a lot of trucks leak fluids all the time. We're looking to see that it's actively leaking at the time of inspection, which would be dripping onto the ground where we can see it. Again, brake components. If we are going underneath, we're taking the measurements from your chamber size, and we're looking at your slack adjusters, and then we're pulling that measurement, and we go off the federal chart that says what your brake maximum measurement can be. So if your brakes are out of adjustment, it just means that your slack adjuster isn't compensating for wear. When you guys are walking around, if you're seeing fluid on the outer rim, that would indicate a wheel seal leak. It's an indicator you want to look inside because you probably have a saturated brake, and then you're not getting braking force from that. Or if you take a peek quickly at your brakes and you see a huge gap there, it probably means that your brakes are not connecting. There will be some pictures coming up of that. For your horn, there has to be one usable at all times, so one has to work. Just to go back to seatbelt, just because I've seen this a couple times recently, it needs to be affixed to the motor vehicle properly. So if it breaks, you need to get it fixed. Do not use zip ties, or I've seen one secured with a load lock. Just get it fixed or it's not going to work right. Again, we talked about steering wheel lash. ABS system needs to be functioning on the truck and trailer. It should cycle on and off on the truck, and the light should cycle on and off on the trailer as well. Again, air loss rate, we went over that one. Interior condition, hopefully none of you guys are hoarders in your trucks, but just keep in mind if you get into a crash with that stuff, it's all stuff that can damage you, even if you're belted. And you should be able to function freely in your cab without any of this stuff getting in your way. So safety equipment, fire extinguisher. This is a requirement to be checked on your pre-trip inspection. It must be secured, charged, and easily accessible. You must know where it's at. So if you're asked during an inspection and it takes you 10 minutes to find your fire extinguisher, you most likely will get a violation for failing to inspect it. You should know where it's at. Like I said, it needs to be easily accessible. If you need to use it, you need to be able to get it out. It should not be covered in piles of stuff. Same with that as your warning devices. 3 triangles or 3 flares in working condition. If you break a triangle from using it, you need to replace it. These need to be accessible as well, and you need to know where they're at. You should be able to catch something like this on your pre-trip inspection. Cord on a tire. If this is a steer tire, this is an automatic out of service violation. If it's on a dual set, it is a violation, but it would have to be on both to be an out of service. Lack of brakes. If you peek underneath and you see this, we probably have a pretty big issue. Shouldn't be going down the road like this. Yep. Here's a saturated brake. This one was an active wheel seal leak, and you can start to see that on the outside on the rim. It'll have black marks where your lug nuts are, and you don't have the braking force or capacity that you need for this brake when it's applied now. Here's just another image of that on the top side. So some of the, like these two are easier to spot when you're doing a walk around if you just take a look underneath quick. So we'll go into load securement, but are there any specific questions with what we're looking at when we inspect?
Disc brakes. What do you look at for disc brakes?
For disc brakes, we're looking for severe rusting. When you brake, they won't move, so we can still tell that they're making contact. And then we have mirrors that we look, so we're still looking to make sure all the braking components are there. They're locked in. I'm not an expert at what every component is called, but they have to be locked in, so when they slide that disc in there, there's a lock on the top. There's still pads in there. So we're just kind of looking to make sure all those components are there. Discs are harder to check if they're getting the braking capacity that's required, but the state of Minnesota just got a performance brake testing machine that's making that a lot easier for us. So if you have disc brakes, we can put you on that, and it measures each wheel end separately to tell us your braking capacity. So disc is a little bit trickier, but we still check to make sure all the components are there. Yep.
You said about driver inspection, and it sounded mostly like you were just checking that they had a seatbelt and their license is correct and all that. Have you ever come across someone that is like, you could tell visibly that they're extremely fatigued? So if that would happen, like, what would you do? They could just take a nap right there, or would they take them out of service, or what would happen?
They're coming to just out of the service.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll touch on. I've got that question in here. We'll touch on that with hours of
Okay,
service.
I'm sorry.
Nope, that's okay. If I forget to bring, I'll write it down, because we'll touch on that, and that question is in here about that. All right. So for load securement, your loads are going to fall into our general rules for cargo securement. So the cargo needs to be secured to prevent it from leaking, spilling, blowing, or falling from the motor vehicle. It must be immobilized or secured to prevent shifting upon or within the vehicle to such an extent to affect the vehicle's stability or maneuverability. If it does not work under this, it's an out of service. All of your load cargo should be secured regardless for movement. You can get a violation that does not put the vehicle out of service for cargo securement if it's not secured. You shouldn't have that load shifting back there. These are going to be more flatbeds, but these apply for load securement. This is what we don't want to see on the road. And I've got some in trailers too. And so all this stuff is stuff we're trying to avoid having on the road because it causes big issues. So the rules apply to all types of cargo, and then there is commodity specific when you get into heavy machinery or paper rolls, things like that. So when you're securing them, it has to be structures of adequate strength, dunnage or dunnage bags, shoring bars, tie downs, or a combination of them. If it's cargo that's going to roll, it has to be secured with chocks, wedges, cradled, basically prevented from rolling. So this is more if you're hauling on a flatbed, which you guys are mostly enclosed, right?
Mm-hmm.
All enclosed, I should say. But this, if you ever want to know what your strap is rated for, so if you are still putting a strap on the rear end of that load, you probably want to do at least a 4-inch strap because that's what's keeping it from moving rearward versus like a 1.5-inch strap that's not going to do anything. But they are rated right on them. And if they're not, we measure and then we get what they're rated for. Alright, that's for a flatbed. Again, I know it's a picture of a flatbed, but this is when you have improper load securement. Center beam, straps weren't touching the beam at all. And then they're using straps on steel that's covered in ice. So that whole center beam shifted, which this can happen in the rear of a trailer too. So even if there was a front end of a trailer there, it could still go through that just as easily if you have heavy loads back there. Here's the back end of a trailer. So this is what we want to avoid for load securement for more than one reason. It's an unsecured load, and then it's batteries, which now you enter the hazmat world, and you enter a lot more regulations. So when we open your trailer, if it looks like this is what we're going to avoid. You're going to be put out of service, and it has to be corrected before you're going to be able to leave. And I've seen this with the sliding axles on the rear of a trailer too that have not been locked into place. They can come out from underneath that trailer, and then you have the trailer going one direction and the axles are not moving. Or this was not locked in, so when they take a curve. So just make sure when you're inspecting that stuff that your tandems are locked into place back there, your fifth wheel is locked into place. And this. We don't want to shove stuff in any which direction it can go and call that secured. Not really sure how they loaded or unloaded that car, but
I've been looking for a Highlander.
it was pretty good. Okay, so that's it for this one because you guys don't do heavy equipment at all. So any questions on the load securement? No.
Is, just for breaking the seal,
Yeah.
is only the highway patrol have the authority to do that? Or can any police department, or?
So we train county and city police departments. They go through the same federal training that we do to become inspectors. So they'll be able to break the seal as well. But if you're stopped by anybody that can inspect a commercial motor vehicle, I think any law enforcement can open up a trailer.
They can check, yeah, they can check roads, yeah.
But they'd have to re-secure it.
Yeah, and they might, a local agency might not, like Jess was saying, we have the seals that we'll give you to reseal. They might not be able to do that right there on scene. More than likely, if they want in to look, they might call for one of us, a trooper, or maybe if they have a commercial vehicle person in their department, they might have them come out to help them out with it. So, but yeah, if there's something that they want to look at, they can look at it.
And you have something that can break a rail seal too?
Oh, what seal?
A rail seal? We
The
use
metal ones?
The bolts?
Yeah, we have bolt cutters. We do. And other departments usually don't call us if they're at that point. But yeah, we have bolt cutters. Now, we don't have that type of seal to replace it with, but we can cut them off.
Real quick, what about fastening items to the catwalk?
Okay. So if you are fastening items to the catwalk, they do need to be secured to there. It was probably about a year ago that the feds started allowing bungee cords for use as securement with dunnage. So that could be your spare tire on the catwalk, or if you're securing wood or other small objects to the catwalk, you can use bungee cords, straps. You can secure things there, they just need to be secured. If you are using bungee cords, remember we live in a state that has winter 6 months out of the year, and they do lose their elasticity and ability to hold items down the more you use them and the more you stretch them. And if you're going to use 50 bungee cords, you might as well put a strap. But yes, you can secure those small items there. If it is part of the actual load, you cannot use a bungee cord, and it shouldn't be secured to your catwalk. It should be in the rear of the trailer. Did that answer that one for you? Or did you have a specific item in mind?
I was thinking about grit or, grit for getting out of slick spots. Bags of grit.
Okay. Yep, you can put them there as long as you secure them down to where they're not going to move or come off of that catwalk.
Some people would think about a deer they struck throwing on there too. Somebody I've heard of them.
As long as you get a permit for the deer.
Yeah, like you said, as long as you've got a permit for that thing. Go for it.
Don't tag.
Yeah. Don't you usually want to dress them, skin them and dress them right away though? I don't know.
You should have jerky by the time you get home.
There you go.
They'll bring it out by the time we got there.
Anything else with load securement? No? With that too comes weight. I don't have that in here. So we're gonna start getting a lot more trucks that load because we get into that super fun holiday season where everybody wants to ship everything everywhere. If you're driving a truck that has a single axle, it's 20,000 pounds. If it's a tandem, it's 34,000. If it's a tridem, it's 43,000. So you just have to remember where your axle placement is, what you're hauling. Yes, drivers are responsible for what's in their trailer for the weight at the time you are stopped. Whether you see it loaded or not, or you have anything to do with it being hooked up to the trailer, you are operating the commercial motor vehicle at the time of stop, at the time that you are weighed. You are liable and the citation does get written to the driver. Doesn't mean the company can't pay for it, but it does get written to the driver. Now with the weight citation, it is not a moving offense, so it does not affect your CDL or driver's license like a speeding ticket would. But it still does get written to the driver, and it is the driver's responsibility. So that was a question in here about weight. Yep.
Is there a limit to how many of those you can get a year?
No. I mean, I wouldn't aim for the highest number by any means. There's no limit. I've seen the same dump truck, but I've seen the same dump truck driver probably 10 times this year. So there's any questions with weight? Okay, and like I said, that's state regulated, so you may cross the border and they may have different weight laws. Okay, hours of service, we're gonna kind of go through some of this fairly quickly. We all know it's changing. Come December 17th, everybody's required to be on an ELD, so it has to meet those ELD requirements that the feds set out. As of right now, there's no extension to that date, but we're only at the end of October. If the driver has a day cab tractor and they're stranded in their tractor for 10 hours, would that be a reset if they didn't sleep in a hotel or sleeper berth? The federal government does not see a day cab tractor as appropriate sleeping quarters. It doesn't meet measurements or specifications that they require for sleeping quarters. So you should be trying to get that driver off somewhere where they can sleep, or because they don't see it as that. Let me see.
On number 7, it's kind of pertinent to that too, as far as if they're stuck on the highway, and let's say they run past their 14 or even 16, but they're stuck on the highway, can they, what's the regulation to just get off the highway? They can't just park on the highway.
It would depend on why they're stuck on the highway. So if they're on the highway and their hours end just because they've been driving and not paying attention, they could get in trouble for going over their hours. If they're stuck on the highway because they got stopped and they can't get to the exit because there's a crash in front of them, the driver would then have to continue. What they would be allowed to do at that time, it's one of the only usable reasons to use personal conveyance, is switch to that mode to the next available stopping place. Not to the truck stop of choice or parking lot of choice. Next available place the driver can stop, they have to stop. Does that answer that one fully
That's
for you?
good, thank you.
Okay. Alright, so driving time and rest breaks. So it's 11 hours of driving time during that 14-hour period. You have your half an hour rest break after at or before 8 hours of on-duty time, which that one might be changing. That's one of the ones the feds are talking about changing, is that 30-minute break.
In which direction? Meaning?
Getting rid of it. So then you've got to have your 34-hour restart. So this is going to go into the 78 consecutive days. There was a question on here about that. So how those rules work is based on the company, not based on the driver. So if UPS runs 7 days a week, all of their drivers can be on the 70-hour, 8-day work week. So it's specific in here. So the only restriction regarding the use of the 70-hour, 8-day rule is that the motor carrier must have commercial vehicles operating every day of the week. So it's based on the company and the vehicles, not the driver. So there's 2 questions in that, so they'd both fit under, it'd be perfectly fine for them to do the 70-hour, 8-day, because UPS is open 7 days a week. Okay? Any other questions regarding that one?
I think what the driver had that question was that if you're gonna run 14 hours a day for 5 days a week, it's not really a 8-day week, it's really still a 7-day week. If their schedule is 5 days a week, but they're running 70 hours in 5 days, is that still okay?
Yeah, that's fine. As long as they're not exceeding their maximum drive time.
Okay, because the company is under the 8-day rule, so really
Yep.
whatever their personal schedule is does not matter.
Nope, they just don't exceed their maximum drive time, and then they're fine.
So does that put
Yep.
every employee on that 8-day versus the 7-day at that point, or is it employee by employee?
That's company based. So
Okay.
basically the company can use that rule. It's in their best interest to use the 70-hour, 8-day rule anyways. The only time that companies use the other rule is if they're a company that's only open Monday through Friday. So it's based on the company, on when their trucks run, not based on employee. Because the time records based on employee to employee on what they should be doing would be a nightmare for whoever does them. So the feds made it easy and said if your trucks run on this rule, you can continue on this rule. So then it goes into short haul exemption. They are exempt from the 30-minute rule, so if any of you run local, stay within your 100 air miles. You don't have to take that 30-minute rest break. It's 11-hour rule, 14-hour rule in more depth. Are there any questions about those rules?
Is there any discussion about extending that air mile radius or reducing it what?
As far as I've heard, there's nothing going on with extending the air mile radius. There's just a couple other things regarding hours and being on duty that might be changed in your guys' benefit, but I haven't heard anything about that yet. So yeah, it's 100 air miles for your CDL holders, which is about 124 standard miles, and then 150 if you're a non-CDL holder. So if you're sitting in the truck or unloading, offloading, helping with any of that, you have to record that time as on-duty time. It does go into your 14 hours. That would be inspecting the vehicle, and then you'd go to driving time for any of the driving. I'm kind of going through these pretty quickly just because some of them might change and most of them are pretty basic for how they've been. Does anybody have any big questions regarding hours of service? The only big change right now in place is just the ELD. Are you guys running fully ELD compliant? So then that won't be a big change for you guys. We haven't updated a lot of those yet, but with your ELD, just make sure that your information is accurate in there, all of your header information, that you've got shipping information in there with every time you have a load, shipping number, commodity, and then make sure when you're certifying that you are checking it. We do see ELDs malfunction, so you still need to be checking your hours before you hit that certified submit button. Because if we have to find it, there's already going to be an issue when you get stopped, so it's best to avoid that. With that ELD, you guys are also required to carry the instruction sheet on how it works in the cab of your truck for the inspector, and to have blank paper logs in your possession if it malfunctions. Now, if it malfunctions, You only have up to 8 days to get it fixed before you are required to have a federal exemption letter on why you are not running under an ELD. So just remember that if it malfunctions, you want to let your company know right away, because they're going to have to take the steps to get it fixed or get that federal exemption letter. So you can go on paper for up to 8 days, and that's it. Sometimes roadside, we don't see these things or see some of the malfunctions or edits, but when you get audited by the state DOT or the feds, they see all of this information on the backside. So just remember that if you have drivers that are having issues with their ELDs, hopefully all of those kinks come out before the 16th. And then it's any issues with the ELD, if it's not working, not malfunctioning, and you never switch to paper, it is considered not having a log if it's not recording properly, and it's 10 hours out of service. These are just your standard things that are required on there to make sure that you have your main office address. If you have a co-driver, they have to be listed in your logs. I don't know if some of you guys run two to a truck. Shipping document number, total hours. Most of the electronic systems add all this stuff up for you, which is fantastic. And it also tells us where your violations are. And most of them will give you guys a warning too, if you're hitting your violations. This is very old school with paper, but it just kind of shows you what's required, what it's going to look like when we see it. There's a lot more information that an ELD is required to have, so the header is like 10 times more information now. But when we transfer your logs, this is what we can see it all on one screen over into the system. So just make sure you're keeping your logs current. Here's the 100 air mile. Let's see. Short haul. One of the bigger things we see with companies is a false logbook. Anytime you're trying to conceal hours, hide hours, you're jumping locations, unplugging your devices, we can tell that. It notifies us when we transmit those logs, and we can see like how'd you get from this location to this location, and then you get a false logbook, which can be an out of service for up to 10 hours. So just avoid that. Otherwise, any other logbook questions before we start answering some of the other questions on here? Good with logbooks? I don't think I've had an issue really with UPS.
ELDs, it's pretty foolproof though.
Yeah, it does it for you, and it kind of tells you. Now, do you guys have it turned off for personal conveyance? Like your driver can't use it, or?
I think we call it paid trial, is that right? Or what?
So we can answer the fatigue question now. Do you want to So fatigue in the state of Minnesota is a huge deal. We get, when we inspect and we have this issue, we get a lot of clearance. We have to go all the way up to our lieutenants in order to document this violation. But yes, it does get called in. If you're weaving all over the road, falling asleep at the wheel, if I'm talking to you during an inspection and you cannot keep your eyes open, you will be placed out of service for fatigue. I mean, you're operating 80,000 pound or more vehicle on the roadway, you should be able to operate it awake and not be tired. One of the questions in here with that was, at what point can you state that you, the driver, is too tired or is not fit to drive? That's not something that we can necessarily regulate or tell you when you can state that, but it is important that if you are sick and have taken cold medicine that's going to make you tired and you can't operate, that you notify your supervisor. Or if you feel you can't operate the vehicle, you notify your supervisor, and they have to take the next steps to see whether you're physically able to or not. We can't pinpoint exactly at what point the company has to shut you down. The cases that we have for fatigue are very small. That's very,
It's basically a case-by-case basis.
Yep.
I mean, there's, an admission by the driver saying, I'm just too tired, or if we're following, we have driving conduct, it's not a windy day, wind's not a factor, it's a beautiful day, sunny out, and the truck's all over the road, you stop, and like Jess said, the driver, having a hard time keeping their eyes open. They tell you, I'm tired, I was up all night last night, I just had a kid. The baby was up all night, I didn't get any sleep, I'm exhausted. It's basically just gonna be a case-by-case basis. And then, like Jess said too, we have to go to a supervisor, we have to go to a lieutenant before we make that determination. Basically, the lieutenant's gonna listen to what we have, and they're gonna make that determination, so.
I missed a question for hours of service. So if you start the week and you're a 100 air mile driver and you go over, the day that you go over that 100 air miles, you're required to log. So whether you have to have an ELD or a paper log depends. If you go out of your 100 air miles 8 days or less in any 30-day period, you're exempt from an ELD and you can have it on paper. You just have to keep that paper log with you. And then if they ask, you would say, this is the only day that I've gone outside of that mileage, and present that log. Alright, some of these are gonna be more you. There was one I missed for inspection too, about the annual inspection for a trailer. If a trailer inspection date expires at midnight en route, will it be out of service? So if that federal inspection expires that day at midnight, it would be a violation the next day, but we do not place out of service for that. Your out of service items are going to be your critical items, braking issues, air hoses that are cut all the way through, inability to maintain air pressure, your load securement issues, suspension, steering components that are worn, too much movement, suspension components missing. Wintertime, frozen airbags is a big one we see when they get some fluid in the lines and then none of your system is working properly. Those are the out of service items that we're looking for. At the rearmost part of the vehicle, if you're bobtailing or hauling a trailer, brake lamps, turn lamps, inclement weather, headlamps. Those things are what we're looking for out of service versus just you have a clearance light out type of issue. That makes sense for that part?
Yep.
Okay.
Are you on the inspections? You want to take number 2 also?
Yes. Okay, the dog tracking question. So, it is not a measurement of inches. When we've had calls for dog tracking, it's either, are you talking more like your double trailers?
No, I just single with the axles out of alignment on the back of the trailer, so the trailer is, let's say, hitting the white line on the shoulder, and the tractor could be on the dotted line on the other side of the tractor. So in other words, it's
You've
going
probably seen
down the
more
road
of that.
sideways.
We get, I've only been called out twice for dog tracking, and both times the trailer had been hit or had hit something to knock that whole, it shifted that whole axle, and then that's a shifting of the axle, which is an issue, and it's out of service. There's no measurement of inches. It's if we get called to it and a trooper stops it or thinks it's an issue, we're going to be inspecting that axle, trying to figure out why it's doing that.
We normally find this on our rail trailers. It's got the separate chassis, and I don't know what happens at the rail yard, but it's not uncommon that they will be enough out of alignment due to whatever happened at the rail yard, that one side of the trailer is on one side of the lane and the tractor could be on the other.
And we don't get a lot of calls for that.
Yeah,
So if you're pulling through the scale, though, I mean, you don't worry about it?
Not unless I'm watching your truck and your trailers
Okay.
impeding the next lane where nobody could get by. But no, not even on the interstate. We don't get a lot of calls for that.
So as long as the trailer and the tractor can stay in the same lane, we're good?
Mhm.
right, yeah. Probably when people start calling is if it's going into another lane.
Okay.
And then that's when we see more major issues with the axles under there.
I got a question. We had a lot of snow this past winter, and if there's snow drifts on top of a trailer, at what point, you know, I mean, I've been behind some trailers and all of a sudden sheets of snow are falling off and.
So, yeah, so the driver's responsible to make sure that that there's no ice and snow buildup on the trailer. We get, during the winter, we get called on it all the time. So basically what it falls under the state statute of littering. Technically, we won't put you out of service. It's not an out of service, it's not a federal out of service violation. But we'll tell you that if you continue to drive down the road and snow and stuff comes off, the first time is basically gonna be, get the snow off of there and be on your way. If you ignore us and go, screw it, I'm just gonna drive down the road and let snow come off, then we're gonna stop you and give you a ticket for it. You continue to drive, we'll stop you again and give you a ticket for it. It's, because basically, I don't know, last year, that one woman got, was on the news where, the big ice chunk came off the semi and, went through the window and hurt her and her kid. So there's it's just a hassle dealing with it here. You'll get companies that everybody's got, and everyone I stopped last year had an excuse of why they couldn't get up there and get it off of there. Will we put you out of service? No, but we'll tell you that it's not safe for you to drive down the road with it, get the snow off. And basically what it's doing is it's trying to protect you and your company, because when it does fall off and it hits somebody's car and the car gets damaged, then ultimately the company is going to be responsible for those damages. So pain, but the snow and ice needs to come off so it doesn't hurt other drivers.
How do drivers get up there to get the snow off?
We just go to the shop. If you go to the shop, they have to go up one of those long, I see drivers all the time and many doing it. And then they just go up with brushes and.
But if you're on the road at the time, you get pulled over.
But it would be, so if you're leaving here, taking a load somewhere, then you would go to the shop. But I see, like if you pick something up from an extended center that you can't do it, that would be different. But if we're leaving from one of our 3 buildings, we can just go to the shop.
If you get stopped at the scale, we make you sit there till you take it off. Drivers have climbed up there. We can't federally put you out of service, but like you said, if you leave, you're gonna get pulled over.
We actually had a trailer where the roof collapsed under the snow. So.
We've seen it however the company decides they want to handle it. We've seen drivers climb up there. We've had them call companies out to do it. It's an extremely hazardous situation. I mean, in your own personal car, have you been behind one that's just blowing snow? You can't see anything. So we just ask that you do your best. Now, sometimes ice, you're not gonna.
Yeah, you might not be able to see it.
Yeah.
But if also you're driving down the road and you're seeing big chunks coming off, you might want to I would advise pulling over and see what you can do to get it off of there. But yeah, I mean, like you said, you've probably seen them driving down the road with 3 feet of snow on the back and it's just blowing and falling. And yeah, those are the ones that we're trying to get to stop and get that taken care of.
All right, there's some more weather ones.
You guys need to get a shovel.
I'll hand it right to you. No problem. Come on down to the shop.
So then with weather, there's a question about, is it possible to get a ticket for driving too slow on the highway under the posted minimum? And then the other part is that, what if road conditions are so poor that it is too dangerous to even drive the posted minimum?
So on the posted minimum, so if you're on a freeway 70, the posted minimum is 40, and you're driving underneath that.
Correct.
Are you driving that for a long period of time?
Yes.
That would probably be a problem. I would try to figure out an alternate route, because basically that minimum speed limit under perfect driving conditions is an enforceable speed limit. And you could get a ticket for impeding traffic if you can't maintain that minimum speed limit.
Well, I think all the traffic's probably traveling under that minimum. It's just the condition, let's say you go from the Iowa border back here and it's a blizzard and you're going 30.
Right, so I thought it was a 2-part question. So I thought one was asking is, under ideal conditions, if you're driving under the 40-mile-an-hour minimum posted speed.
No, I think it's more on, it's probably a typo or something.
Okay.
It would be under adverse conditions.
Yeah, then you drive whatever the conditions deem that's what a safe speed for you is. I would say go to the right lane if you can find it. You know, in Minnesota, the road, they'll get covered with snow and it's hard to determine what lane. People just make tracks. If you can get over into a right lane and let the people that want to go faster go by, and you can watch them go in the ditch and laugh at them as you drive by. But no, you're not going to get a citation, or you're not going to. Probably we're too busy to be stopping you in a snowstorm anyways, because we're dealing with other people that are going too fast going in the ditch. So
I just thought of a question because of this that just came up. Okay, so if the tracks, I've had this happen where the tracks are following and then all of a sudden it'll go into another lane. There'll be two lanes of traffic going, but the track will come over. Now, who's in the right? Is the person that's in their lane when it's, or the person that's following the track?
I wouldn't, following the track isn't probably, I'm just saying, that's what people do is they'll follow the track. If the track leads you in and there's somebody next to you and you smash into them, that's probably going to be a problem. I mean, that's something you got to be aware of. I wouldn't just follow the track and then crash into the, you know what I mean? I try to make.
So the lanes still, if there's two lanes of people going and somebody just follows the track
and they hit you?
They're at fault.
Yeah, right. Because you should still be able to figure out that there's two lanes of traffic and try to. I get it. It gets tough, but
Yeah.
the freeway's wide enough where you should be able to at least keep two lanes going in one direction.
Jess, can you kind of tag on to number 12 with that same, it's kind of the same question, slightly different twist.
So would get a ticket for driving on roads that could be considered so poor that it's too dangerous to drive on them.
I'm trying to think, if the road's closed, you know, if they close it and the barriers are down, like in greater Minnesota, and you went around the barrier, then yes, that would be an issue. If you've already gone by it and they close it, then you just, you know, then you're gonna need to obviously continue on to a point where you can get to a safe spot. You're never gonna get a ticket in Minnesota for driving on a road, because
Now where you're going to get a ticket is if you're driving on that icy road and you jackknife because you're going too fast, hit the brakes, hit another car. Those are going to be issues where you could possibly receive a citation. But yeah, so then that hit with the question 21. Criteria for shutting a road down, though, is not something that we determine. That's way above us. That's the Department of Transportation. So we could not begin to give you the criteria and what they go through before they determine to shut a road down. We may, if during the winter time, if they're having a road that's extremely icy, they're probably going to try and divert traffic until they can get a salt truck out there. But yeah, DOT would be the one that would shut the actual road down.
yeah, MnDOT makes that decision when they're going to drop the barriers.
And then the turnaround or shut down due to weather, if the road is not closed, would be up to you guys to determine if you want your driver to continue on the road in the conditions that he's in, if the road is still open, or if you want him to find a safe place to shut down. There's nothing in statute that says when we have to make you shut down unless you're driving on a road that you're driving on after it was closed. So here, you want to do the high beams 4 and 5?
Sure. So question 4 is it legal to flash your high beams for telling someone to come back to your, so flashing the high beams, you can't do, you're not supposed to do that. Basically, the high beams are just designed to be on when it's dark and you need to see. So flashing them at another driver, you could, I guess, no, you're not supposed to do it. Do you do it? Yeah. Are you going to get stopped for it? You might come across somebody that wants to stop you for it. Am I going to stop you for it? Probably not. I'm just letting you know that flashing the high, and then you'll see when you're driving out on the road, somebody will be coming at you with their high beams on. Typical reaction is to flash your high beams at them. No, you can't do that. High beams are just steady on. so you can see better, you know, when it's dark out. So flashing them is not, you shouldn't be doing that. So question number 9, four-way flashers, I'm trying to figure out what exactly, can you just drive down the road with your four-way flashers on? Is that what the question is? Or?
I see it a lot if it's really inclement weather, like we were talking about, like say the minimum speed limit is 40, but you're going, it's just that choppy ice and you're really only going 20. I've seen a lot of truckers with their flashers on.
Well, according to AAA, the Minnesota laws, hazard lights are not permitted while driving except to indicate a traffic hazard.
Right, so I think it's different in other states, because I know in southern states, when it's raining really hard, you'll see they'll turn their flashers on. So, you know, when it's raining really hard, or if it's in the middle of a snowstorm and you want to turn your flashers on, chances of us doing anything about it, like I said, is probably slim and none, because we're going to be really busy dealing with 100 other things. If I see a truck drive, like I had a side-dump truck driving down the shoulder with its flashers on. And he kept going. I thought he was going to pull off somewhere, and just kept driving down the shoulder. So I stopped and talked to the driver. Well, he had a flat tire, and he wanted to get 30 miles down the road with his flashers on, driving down the shoulder. And I'm like, no, you can't do that. If you're on the side of the road and the truck, you need to pull over. You want to turn your flashers on because you have to do something. That's basically, the flashers are designed to let people know that there's something going on with the vehicle. So, does that?
Yeah, I think, and it really depends how you determine what traffic hazard is, because technically a traffic hazard could be icy road ahead of you, and you've got a pile up ahead of you, or you're slowing down because it's icy. So I would assume there's some leeway on that. But
Yeah, there would be. I mean,
a visibility issue would be a huge one.
Right, if it's snowing really bad, and you can't see 2 feet in front of you, and you want to turn your flashers on to give you a little bit of extra visibility, nobody's going to say anything about that. If, like I said, if that guy had just pulled off to a safe location instead of trying to drive 30 miles to go get his tire repaired, I would have been fine with that. He was just going to pull over. I'd let him drive a block. I'll bring you a block or whatever to get you to a safe location. I mean, we'll tell car drivers, turn your flashers on, drive up to the next exit, pull off, so you're not making a mess on the freeway. Basically, what we're trying to do is ensure that the free movement of traffic on the freeway.
can you maybe expound on that point? Trooper Ted Foss, which was killed on I-90.
Yep.
They were on the side of the road. Can you expound maybe to the drivers as far as if your vehicle's drivable to get off the highway, you would suggest that? Or, obviously you've got a flat tire and it's flat. I personally think it's safer to go to the next exit.
Right, that's what I'm saying. I told him, I said, you would have been fine if you had just pulled over to I can't let you drive 30 miles on a flat tire, obviously, because a flat tire is not a service issue. So, but yeah, if you can definitely make it to an exit, or somewhere where the shoulder's nice and wide, that's safe for you to be. Or like I said, if we come up, we'll try to get you to a safer spot. So a legal U-turn, so help me out, so you're, obviously on a 4-lane, on like 694 or something like that, you're not gonna, there's really no place you're gonna make a safe
Is there a
U-turn.
specific area that your drivers make U-turns that we're questioning what legal and illegal U-turns are?
I don't know exactly where the question came from, but I'm
Okay.
assuming, if you're gonna do a U-turn, say, on a city street, you can't do it in the middle of the street. You have to wait till you go to the intersection, or...
You can make a U-turn, basically, as long as you can see 1,000, I think the statute says it's 1,000 feet, both directions, 1,000 feet, you don't see any and you're not in a curve, you're not going up a hill, or, you know, it's level and you can see 1,000 feet in both directions, no traffic, you can safely make a U-turn, then you can safely make a U-turn. Obviously, an unsafe U-turn would be as if you turned in front of a car and somebody hits you. So you just have to be smart about it. You can't use crossovers on the freeway or anything like that to make a U-turn. I mean, they're all signed, you know, no U-turns. So. Does that help you
Yep,
out?
that's good. We're getting somewhat close on time. Do you have any more of your presentation you want, or we're on questions?
Nope, we're just on questions. It's basic logbook, and I think I've covered all the
Okay.
topics that were
All right,
questions about
a
with
couple
that.
more questions is number 24 talks about 10 by 20 tires or the bias ply slower speed rated tires. Is that illegal to run a speed rated tire on the highway if it's below the speed rating?
There's actually a specific code on that one that talks about tires. Specific tires. Just give me one.
So Jason, while she's looking that up, LED lights, you've got the little LEDs in there. At what point is the light considered non-functional? You've got 50 LEDs in a light, you got 25, is it still good, or 10?
If I'll just make it really basic. If it's lighting up, then it's functional. If it's not, then it's not. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay.
If I can see the light, it's good. If I can't, then that's bad.
For tires, we're looking for that one directly out of what the feds require for commercial vehicles. No motor vehicle may be operated with speed restricted tires labeled with a maximum speed of 55 miles per hour or less. It's saying they do a bunch of testing, which is pages of testing how they test tires out. It's saying that those speed restricted tires do not work on commercial motor vehicles that haul heavy loads on roadways. So you cannot operate with them if they're speed restricted 55 miles an hour or less. Then there was a question about the maximum BAC for an off-duty CDL holder.
It's the same as anybody else driving a car. 0.08.
So if you're off-duty and you have a CDL and you're driving your minivan around drinking,
Everybody always cussing.
How many kids you got? No.
I hope none. That's a lot bigger issue. It's a 0.08. So it is not based off of your driver's license, it's based off of the vehicle being driven. So 0.08. Semi-truck, CDL vehicle, it's a 0.04 to be arrested for it. However, it's a zero tolerance whatsoever with the federal standards, and it is an out of service for 24 hours. For any type of alcohol or drug in the vehicle, so if you stop at a state that has a beer that you don't have at your home state, pick up a case, you get pulled over, 24 hours out of service. If it is not part of the manifested load, you cannot have it with you. I'll let you do that one. 18.
Or,
Did anybody have a question with that?
If not, we'll start wrapping it up.
Okay.
Certainly informative, and I want to thank you both for setting aside some time to come and talk to us today. The drivers that are in this room, and some of the employees we have from the automotive department as well, some very influential people in our department, which has a lot of drivers, so a lot of information that you folks were able to share with us today, they'll be able to communicate that to them as well. If you had any other comments or anything you'd like to share with the driver group as well, just in general, the floor would be yours.
No, I mean, you guys have been a great group today. These were some really good questions we've seen. Hopefully we were able to answer anything for you. At any time, you have my email address. You can contact us. You can call the scales. We do answer the phone. We have an info line. So anytime you guys have specific questions, feel free to call us. We're not scary. We're easy to deal with. So don't get nervous if you get inspected. Don't get nervous if you have a question. Just ask us. We prefer to educate you and help you guys on this end than place you out of service. So, Yep.
All right, thanks a lot for coming. If you have any more questions, write them on your sheet and hand them to Doug. Thanks again.
Yep, thank you.